Our guests today are Sean Snaith and Stuart Fullerton. We join their conversation in the faculty lounge.
One of the best forms of birth control is economic growth, because what demographers have found is that as an economy grows, as it becomes more wealthy, fertility decisions are affected by this, and people tend to have fewer children. And so, for example, Europe, population growth is really ground to a halt. And in the U.S.,
I didn't know that.
Yeah, in the U.S., it's slowed down significantly as well. If you look at family size,
I didn't know that.
If you look at family size, it's gotten a lot smaller. I mean, maybe when you were growing up, 8, 9 kids was not that big of a
no, but a lot of them died too.
Well, okay, that may be true, but now, I mean, it would just be it's completely shocking to me when I meet someone that has 5 kids, let alone 8 or 9, just because of time and the opportunity cost of time and the resources that it takes. So as these economies develop, then they tend to have fewer children per family, and I think that that lowers the trajectory a little bit. And then you've got disease, famine.
But even at this stage of the game, our growth seems to be, as I see it, every time I go out and see another tree has just disappeared or another acre has been turned into a coming soon department store thing. If the population is getting smaller or holding its own, even in the United States, how can we continue to build all this stuff?
Well, I mean, growth...
Who's going to fill it up?
Well, I mean, if we're talking about different sectors, I mean, if population growth suddenly stopped, then the housing stock wouldn't necessarily need to grow as much as it does when the population is growing, for example. But the output of the economy can still grow because, as I said, productivity, innovation allows us to get more out of the existing scarce resources that we have. So it doesn't just have to come from making more people. We can do things in a better way, get more out of these, we still cut down the tree, but let's get more out of it as a result, or find ways to make more of them through, genetic or whatever biological advances we might discover along the way. So, I mean, I think that ingenuity and problem solving and creativity and our ability to become more productive solves a lot of those issues, and that does help drive the ability to produce more.
In the work you're doing on the UCF campus, and when you're studying, and I think somewhere in our conversations, you pointed out to me that there were 12 areas in Florida, growth in Orlando and Tampa, St. Pete, and Naples, I think you said, is considered one of them, and Miami, and let's see if I can remember. I'm old.
I'm young, and sometimes I can't.
I've been out and had a sandwich.
Okay, well, we can put something up on the screen here that will list the 12 and rescue us both. But these are metro areas, so these are sub-areas within the state that are fairly developed economies in and of themselves. And they're all different. Gainesville's different from Orlando, and Miami's different from Pensacola, and the structure of those economies are different, and the industries that are more prevalent in each of those economies are different. And so we're all in the same boat, but different parts of the boat can move in different ways depending on what's happening with a wave. So some national shock that occurs in the U.S. economy might have a different effect in Pensacola than it has in Orlando. And so we try.
Are you strictly Florida oriented, or are you also southeastern United States, so what I guess they call the Eastern Corridor up and down the
I mean, our forecasts, we produce forecasts for the nation as a whole, a U.S. forecast each quarter. That feeds into our state forecast. So we do a forecast for the entire state of Florida as a whole.
Now, who does the national forecast go to?
It's distributed.
Have no idea.
No, okay. It's I'm going to tell you.
Printed, published?
It's printed. Yeah, it's printed. It's also in PDF form electronically. So save a few trees. I was going to give you a copy after the taping, but I think once you see that glossy glossy.
I'll take that right into the bug closet and see how long before I fall asleep.
Well, it's a non-addictive sleep aid.
Oh,
that's
okay.
For sure. Anyway, the U.S. forecast goes out to, we send it out to our mailing list. The predictions and the numbers that are in are included in a number of national panels, the Livingston Survey, the Philadelphia Fed Reserve Survey of Professional Forecasters, USA Today has a
Does
forecast.
our friend in Washington get a copy?
We do send it to our politicians, our friends in government, our friends in the private sector, our friends in the foundation and trustees. Okay. And so friends at the university get copies of it. Right. And really, we get requests, and we get on our website, we have people from around the country that download these publications and take a look at it. So
you can apply for grants. Do you get paid for the funding? In biology, they all today's trend is you have to get a grant to go study something, to hire your student, blah 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 blah. And that's a good question. How do you fund yourself?
Right now, we're funded by the College of Business, okay. And we also get a significant amount of funding from Orange County. It was Mayor Crotty, I think 5 years ago, I might be wrong on the history, had an economic stimulus package that he proposed, and the Institute for Economic Competitiveness was one element of this. And so Orange County's been a big supporter of the Institute, and they continue to be, even in this environment of uncertainty that was caused by the property tax discussions and now change that came out of, or is coming out of Tallahassee.
If I was, gosh, I don't know any of the major businesses that are in Central Florida, but if I had a company that was producing a product, would I come to you to say, what are my chances of this product being appropriate, or where would I go with it? Is it that kind of a thing, or to do me a study to see? I don't know. I really don't. I have no clue.
Okay, that's fair. Let me address that. Well, we wouldn't provide advice about a specific product per se. We could help characterize the market as a whole. You know, you talked about when you were younger looking through a microscope at insects. You know, we're not at the microscope. We're more of a satellite view from maybe not satellite height, but 30,000 feet, and we're looking at the bigger picture of job creation and personal income and gross state product. Financial markets, things like that affect these business decisions, but we're not an invention evaluation service or something like that. There are within the College of Business institutes that are more geared to an entrepreneur that might have an idea for a new product. But
I guess there's a whole think tank of that downtown someplace, isn't there?
Yeah, there's a Small Business Development Center, which is run by the College of Business Administration. There's the National Entrepreneurial Center.
Okay, and you feed your
there's a Center for Innovation on campus, and so they work more with the individual entrepreneur. We, development companies, banks, anyone that's taking a bigger view of a particular market. Our studies can kind of help lay out those big foundations. If they want to get down to the smaller components, then that's not exactly what we do, but we can kind of set the broader parameters. We think this metro area is going to have this many people and this many jobs in these industries in the year 2020. Based on that, how much of your particular product could you expect to sell? So it gives them a foundation more than a specific analysis.
How did you get into this as a young man in Philadelphia, growing up in Philadelphia?
Well, I don't like Philadelphia because I'm from Pittsburgh, but
began with a P, didn't it? I'm close.
Them's his fighting words where I come from.
Same side of the Mississippi River and north of the line, I think.
All you Californians are like that.
You probably got one of those shiny dimes off J.P. Morgan's floor where he used to have you polish them all day. I don't know.
I couldn't get that job. Well, I grew up in Pittsburgh and in the 1970s, and this was a time when outsourcing was taking place, although they didn't call it outsourcing then. It was the steel industry was in decline.
Okay.
Jobs were being lost to more efficient, less costly methods of production in I think Korea at the time. And so all these big mills that Pittsburgh was known for was shutting down, and friends' fathers and my family was affected indirectly by the closing of these mills. And so I saw a lot of people that went from kind of a nice middle class existence into
and that
poverty.
certainly hasn't changed at all, has it?
In terms of that transition occurring,
Yeah.
I understand it better. And getting back to the original question, I didn't really know why all these things were happening, as a youngster. I didn't understand inflation. I didn't know why the line at the gas station was so long and why we could only go on an odd day and not an even day. And, why is the steel company firing people? Why would they do that to people? These people need jobs. And so I think that kind of planted the seed. And then I thought I was going to be a doctor and started in a pre-med program at a liberal arts school in Pennsylvania, and we were forced to take courses from across the disciplines, and I took a writing section that was in macroeconomics, and had a really great teacher, Dr. Adams, and Earl the Pearl, we called him, Earl Adams.
What a neat name! What a neat name!
Yeah, he was a neat guy, and he was very interested in it, and he did a good job explaining it, and all those things kind of resurfaced and all those questions, and I was like, I want to know this. And I thought, well, if I get a PhD in economics, then I'll really know everything. And then that was the real disappointment, was that I got it. I'm like, wait, I still don't know anything. I still don't know everything. I've been
Higher
cheated.
and deeper, and there you are.
I've been cheated. But it did give me a set of tools that I use to this day.
You got your PhD up there also?
I went to Penn State, Pennsylvania as well.
Right.
So. And that's kind of how I got into it. I've had that question asked of me before, and I joked, well, I didn't get accepted into cowboy college, so I had to become an economist. But it's not one of those things you dream about as a kid, I suppose.
Well, I don't know. I wouldn't want to use the term robber barons, but they managed to do very well. and there's a whole new thing. Gosh, there's a whole train of thought that goes off into the philosophy of life and the way the folks lived in the days of what we loosely call the robber barons and the pine barons and all the rest of those folks. A whole sociological thing, a whole other topic of conversation. There have been some wonderful books over the years dealing with that. Did you see those kinds of changes in your childhood also? Probably not by the 70s.
Well, no, I mean, no,
that's all gone.
Yeah,
gone,
I mean,
gone.
I went to the Carnegie Museum, for example, as a young person, and that kind of flowed out of that historical period. But I mean, that region was shaped by that. There's no doubt. A lot of these men made their fortunes in that part of the country. You talked earlier about quality of life, or am I interested in quality of life? And it's one of those things that gross domestic product growth doesn't necessarily translate or capture quality of life. And I think
quality is like good and bad. It depends on where you are and who you are.
Right.
And what it is.
And this is a component of it, of course.
Right.
If you don't have a job, this is going to affect your quality of life here. But I think John Muir said at one point we all need beauty, and my numbers, I know that don't capture that, and they're detached
but for a lot of people
that
do, and math and numbers are very, very important. Absolutely, one of my very good friends is math is his thing. He does computers and he does math, but laughingly coming over to the studio today, I don't know what we were talking about, he says, well, surely we can make a quadratic equation out of that whole thing, which is not the same thing you do, but you do use that kind of math, I'm sure, in your projection, much more math than that in your projections.
We do. The models that we use are sets of mathematical equations that, it's kind of I grew up playing with called an erector set. I mean, it's kind of built together.
Yes.
It's all put together this way, and it keeps things in check because it forces certain things to add up to some total, and it also allows us to model behavioral patterns that we've seen in past data. But I also can play God, so to speak, and shape where these things go. And so a lot of intuition. And
do a lot of computer work then in what you're doing.
I do spend a lot of time in front of the computer.
Because you use one of those fascinating words, modeling.
Right.
And biology people do a lot of modeling too,
Right.
which is kind of the same thing you're talking about, really, in the whole business.
Yeah. Well, it's definitely changed the way things have done. The amount of power that you have sitting on your desktop is...
It's amazing.
It is
absolutely amazing.
It is amazing.
When you look at Florida, do you ever compare it to your home state, or do you ever compare what you're seeing here to where you were at the college, University of Pacific, now out there in California, the Central Valley there?
I do. I do. In different ways. I think what's transpired and is transpiring in California is very applicable to what's happening now in Florida.
Well, it seems geographically it is almost. They're two very long states, and if you ignore the Panhandle, sorry about that, folks, in the Panhandle, but you look at California and I would say automatically Sacramento, Davis mess, the Stockton, California stuff, the Fresno stuff at the bottom, San Diego at the very bottom, Los Angeles coming up to Carmel and the retirement centers and up to San Francisco. I'm sorry, there's something up north, I guess the Chico region, but I'm not sure about that.
Eureka. Well, it's
Eureka, you're seeing the same kind of distribution you're seeing in Florida.
It's a big state. We're experiencing the real estate appreciation now that California has been dealing with for some time, and that shapes patterns both in terms of population growth and migration into and out of the state. California has experienced a migration from the coastal areas to the interior of the state because real estate is so expensive. And a lot of Californians pack up their home equity and they head to Idaho and they head to Oregon and they head to Montana. And I'm starting to see and hear anecdotes of things like that happening now in Florida, where people pack up their home equity and they go to the Carolinas or Tennessee.
Really?
Coastal areas are very expensive to live, and that's going to start pushing development to the interior of the state. That and perhaps the hurricane issue and property tax. But so I see a lot of parallels there. The recent housing price appreciation, California kind of went into that cycle ahead of Florida. So Florida was still kind of peaking after California had started the downturn here. So I watch what's going on there to try to get some insight as to what's happening.
You think
here.
Florida is leveling off or continuing?
It is. I don't think it's as apocalyptic as some people painted.
I think for another 20 years or so, things will kind of continue to...
I mean, I think the current glut in another year and a half will have worked itself down, and then I think we'll get into some normalcy. I think both the current period in housing and the period of the past 2 years, both were aberrations. These were abnormal times.
Which says that we're going to come back to what I was asking originally, this sort of a steady state kind of a
I think we're going to get into that, more of a steady state rate of growth, both in terms of price appreciation and starts, middle of 2008. 2009. What about Pennsylvania? Well, again, we talked about population as a driver. Population in Pennsylvania is pretty stagnant, and that's been some challenges for cities like Pittsburgh as well that have struggled as of late again. They went through the cycle with the steel industry, and then there was a renaissance, and now they're having some financial difficulties once again. But
do you see any change in Florida occurring? I'm really way out to ask this as we continue to Florida. My opinion is we're getting a lot of old folks like me in Florida. Is this going to make a big change?
I think
we certainly need that new med school. Maybe by the time they air this thing, the med school will be done, built, and they'll have a geriatric unit, and I'll be in there. But
as long as you're not there as a cadaver, right? We don't.
Yes, better to be seen than viewed.
I think that's going to continue, a trend that'll continue. I mean, when we've got 78, 77 million baby boomers. The front end of them are just hitting the early 60s, tail end of them in their early 40s. Where they're going to retire, they're not going to Bismarck, North Dakota for their retirement choices.
For the same reason you're down here.
Exactly. I don't miss scraping windows in February mornings and slipping on the sidewalk and things like that. That, you know, I'll take the love bugs and the
sand and salt,
and
yes.
the sand and salt. But so, you know, places like Arizona and Nevada and Florida will continue to draw these retirees. So that's another 20 years of you know, retiree influx.
You folks in your work, are you looking at anything which is certainly not necessarily a biological concept, but a environmental situation? What we're going to do about water in Florida?
There is some talk about.
Do you have some programming in that, some modeling as to our waters and that kind of economic thing?
There are some economists that do work in environmental and resource economics, and that is becoming an issue that I do hear a lot more about. Right now, it's not something that I'm acutely aware of or I'm trying to model specifically within it. But you know, how do you handle the growing population and their needs for water? I mean, I guess I'm just learning a lot about what Florida's like. I didn't know that Florida burned like it did in the summertime, and that was a surprise to me.
That's normal. That's very cyclical.
Yeah. But you know, there's been some talk. There were these groups. I don't know. How Shall You Grow? Maybe you've seen some of the work that they were doing. They were looking at Florida. Well, they started off looking at Central Florida, and then the same group looked at the state as a whole. You know, in 2060. You know, what's it going to look like? Where's the development going to be? How are all these people going to be housed? How are all these people going to have water? One of the issues that they brought up that, you know, I think I've seen in the Caribbean and makes some sense is the rooftop cisterns.
I was down there for Christmas, yes. Everybody has the cisterns up on the roof.
Why not? You know, I could see it getting to that point, but again, it's going to be driven by the economics. I have a friend who lives
up in Louisville, and that's where she gets her water, up on the top of the hill. Is all of the eave, all the drains in the eaves go down in this huge underground system. And it keeps her swimming pool going, and it keeps her going. She has a wonderful indoor swimming pool, and all of it comes out of cistern water that comes out of the roof. I think she was telling me once that there was one year where the cistern went dry, and they had to haul good knows how many thousands of gallons in a big tanker and fill the thing back up again.
Yeah, that's not fun when that happens. But, you know, we respond as individuals, and I think as governments and communities. Price is a driver. Look at gasoline and what happened. You know, we talked about the 1970s. What happened in the 1970s? Well, we had the OPEC oil embargoes, and energy prices went through the roof, and we were all driving these large automobiles made in Detroit that got 7 or 8 miles to the gallon, and all of a sudden here comes Japanese automakers with their compacts and subcompacts and fuel efficiency. You know, who ever thought of that? High mileage. And so Detroit took a beating and lost market share and wised up a little bit and eventually got back on its feet. And then the real price of gas started to fall again, and we started to see the emergence of large SUVs and Hummers, and it was you know, deja vu all over again. Then gas shot up in the wake of Hurricane Katrina, and it's stayed elevated. Again, Detroit suffering, and people are thinking about hybrids and smaller, more fuel efficient vehicles. So, you know, as the cost of water rises, as the price of water rises, and treating water and providing water, then that will start
economically, it will encourage industries to.
Yeah.
I got caught up into some of this here within this last year, looking at the electricity again, and thought, well, thanks to the hurricanes of whatever those years were that we have them and the loss of my trees over my house, why don't I just put huge solar panels up there and convert my old house into a completely solar operative thing? And they're doing a lot of this in California, I think, now, where people are putting in huge arrays up on the roof where they can't be seen, and then putting excess electricity back into the power grid. But by the time I got the price, even with the tax write-offs and all of these things, I would have to stay alive and operate that house for another 40 years to break even. So I turned off another light bulb instead.
Yeah.
But,
well,
go ahead.
I mean, we talked about this, how do you handle growing population?
Yeah.
And I mean, I think I'm a big believer in the innovation and creativity of of humanity. I mean, I think we have an incredible ability to solve problems.
Does the engineering community, because we always laugh over in the biology building that the business people in the engineering building all tend to share the same buildings. There's SEBA 1, SEBA 2, SEBA 3, and
it is physically attached.
9.
Yeah.
We don't really. We have a joke that if you can't make it in engineering, they shove the records down the chute into the business department, which I know you're going to deny immediately. Go ahead and say no.
No, it's a dumbwaiter. It's not a chute.
Okay. But back to a question that I think you've already answered, do the people from engineering come over and say, what do you see in these projections, and look for things to direct their students in for their advanced degrees to go into these things?
Not as much. Not as much? I haven't had those conversations myself, per se. I mean, those...
we need to get some engineering people in here to talk to you.
Well, maybe.
You may become a star on Jerry's show someday.
Yeah. Well, hopefully not today. I'm ready to go home. You know, whether they use those projections, those forecasts, I can't say for sure. But I think when they go out, you know, into the world and they're working for these engineering companies, then they're going to see them, and it will affect their decision making.
On an undergraduate level, do engineering students have to have a certain amount of business courses? Is this something where you can get in and influence the student at an undergraduate level?
I don't know what the requirements are in terms of the curriculum of the engineering. I think they should. I mean, I'm a bit biased. And I also, as we talked about, I came from a liberal arts background, and I'm all in favor of a broad-based education, and certainly anybody living and working in a democracy should have some basic understanding of economics, I believe, and certainly in most of their careers, if not their personal life as well. You know, this information is going to come in handy. Sure. So what they're required to take, I can't say for sure, but you know, typically
Where do you see your area going in the next 20 to 30 years? You're new, you're young, you're to the university, you've got 30 years to go before they drum you out, or
they probably get rid of me sooner than that.
Where do you see, or how would you like to see it go? What's the sense of
I mean,
direction?
I could talk more broadly in terms of you're talking about what I do.
Either you or the institute that you're that you're responsible for.
I mean, what I would like to see, and one of the reasons I came here was that when I was in California, I was doing pretty much the same thing, a national forecast, the statewide forecast, and a forecast for some metro areas, and I was always competing with the UCLA Anderson forecast, which was sort of the de facto gold standard of forecasts in the state. That's what I'd like the Institute's forecast to be. When